I'm here with Matt Laskowski of Mid-Michigan Comics. What are people buying?
So overall, and I would say this would kind of stretch out to just beyond this show in particular, and kind of a trend I've seen over the last 4 or 5 shows. To put it back into perspective, in 2020, 2021, really since probably 2016, 17, Marvel was about 80% of all sales. And that included DC and independent, 75, 80%. Now what you're seeing is about a 50-50 split between Marvel, DC, well, we'll say maybe 45, and 10% to the independents and things of that nature. So, yeah, I mean, DC has come on red hot of late, not just at this show, but in general. People are, I mean, you just kind of saw behind me, people were, right before we started this, people were digging in the DC boxes. They used to be, no one wanted other than Batman. And now people are looking at buying, I had a guy buy a run of Justice League, just filler copies. That 2-3 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. So people are looking for those, $5 to $10 copies of DC books that they weren't looking for just a couple years ago.
Do you think that they could be anticipating some like hot books coming around the corner from James Gunn taking over the DC universe?
I think that's absolutely what it is. I'd like to say that people are discovering, the art and stories, the Nick Hardy's, Aquaman, looking at Neil Adams, not just his Batman work, but his work on other titles, on Superman, House of Mystery, etc. But I will say this, when you've got like something that I would say would be artificially propping it up like a movie or something, people do discover those art and stories and then they become fans of it, right? Like, they might buy a Swamp Thing comic because there's a TV show or a Netflix show or something like that coming out. But then once they realize how good the story is, how good the Bernie Wrightson art is, right? How good Alan Moore's stories were on the title, then they want all of them. I mean, that's kind of how I came about it is, this is really good, And I think that's going to keep happening with a lot of the DC titles. People are going to start collecting some of those runs that they weren't looking for a couple of years ago because they didn't know about. They were all ingrained in the Marvel stuff.
So is there any particular books, any issues that people are looking for right now?
The first Guy Gardner, the first Metamorpho, because of the movie hype. Other books that people always want that they continue to ask about, the Neil Adams Batman covers, like Batman 227, Batman 251, those striking, iconic books like that. People always want them. And then people still want the Marvel keys, just not at the clip that they did a couple of years ago.
It doesn't seem like people are excited right now with the way the MCU is going.
No, it's not. That's an accurate statement. I'll be polite and say that's true.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started collecting or getting into the comic book business?
So I'm 43. I started collecting comics when I was 3 years old and made my parents read them to me. And I have stacks of them from when I was a kid that with the covers attached and everything on them. That's how I got into it. My dad, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, he worked for a place in Ann Arbor that did software imaging for doctors anyway. The UPS driver, FedEx driver, one time came and said, "Hey, Bob, I know you've talked about your kid liking comics. I have this old 10-cent Superman that I found someone was throwing out at their house, and I picked it up. Do you want it for $20? And he bought it for me. I remember when I unwrapped it for a Christmas or birthday, I just looked at that, and I was like, oh, my God, when I saw this 10-cent comic, my first one I ever had. And that kind of started the buzz. And I actually recently just finished my own Superman collection from 1 through 423, and I've got it complete now, which is, yeah, awesome. I wish I would have finished it before he passed away because he's the one that really got me started into this. But I will say, I struggled reading, and I've gone to someone that's, 4-pointed calculus and went on to college and everything like that, in later years. But I struggled reading. I was not doing well in school. Comic books absolutely saved me. I would not be where I'm at in life without comics. I learned how to read off these things. I've been a lifelong collector, and I'm still a ham and egger dealer. You talk about people like Todd or like Roger was, Rick, some of these other guys. Those are what I consider the real dealers. I'm a collector who sets up and buys comics, because I can get access to them and buy collections, and that's how I get books at good prices and everything. But yeah, so I'm still a ham and egger, but I'm still more of a collector anyway now. But
Tell us about your inventory here today. What are the big books you have here? What's the most expensive book you got on the wall there?
the most expensive books are not mine. They are friends of mine that I've let them put up on the wall. The ASM #1, Amazing Spider-Man #1, the Star Spangled War stories, and the pre-code horror books there are not mine. I keep a lot of my really nice pre-code horror anyway, but they're my buddies over here. So those are actually the higher end stuff. And honestly, this is a little trick of the trade for your listeners, for your fans. I don't mind having that kind of stuff up there. People are like, well, they're going to buy your friends' books and not yours. So what? They're going to stop at my booth and look at that and be like, oh my gosh, Amazing Spider-Man #1. And I also get to, tease some of the people like you that I'm friends with that and say, yes, look at my ASM one. It's much nicer than your copy, right? And tease some of the other dealers than I do feel like some of those big dealers. But yeah.